service the first time, please join us downstairs for coffee and snacks. Feel free to grab a green mug so we can welcome you in our community. I am Megan Griffin. My pronouns are she and her. I am pleased to be with you today as your worship associate. Our music today will be provided by Jamie Pastman, our music coordinator, and our video and sound production is provided by Alex Dvorak. Childcare is available in the lower level of the RE building across the alley. You are welcome to take your children there at any time. Although children are welcome to remain in the service, all voices are welcome here. I ask everybody to put your phones in worship mode. No ringing, beeping, buzzing, clanging, or chirping, unless you're a doctor. You're always welcome to take pictures or share our community on social media. Just be mindful of the people around you. Now I'd like everyone to say hello to those around you. Next weekend is a busy weekend. On Saturday, October 14th, there will be a Buddhist retreat right here in the church from 9 to noon. Join the festivities and learn the basics of Buddhism, meditation, and fellowship. And treats. That's right, treats. Guests are welcome. After the retreat, Lenny Edgen will show the power of enlightenment by blocking out the sun. But Lenny has warned us that he hasn't yet achieved full enlightenment, so the sun won't fully be blocked out. So bring appropriate eye protection. On Sunday, October 15th, we are having a big celebration here at church. We are celebrating the dedication of our church in 1889 and the anniversary of Swami Vivekananda's speech here in 1893. There will be a joint program with the Vivekananda Vedanta Society of Chicago at 5 p.m. Following the program, we will be sharing a potluck meal together. We hope you will be able to join us and contribute to our meal. To honor our guests, we would like to keep the meal vegetarian and vegan. Please sign up to share something in the link in News and Notes. The UCH Green Sanctuary invites you to participate in Faith in Places 2023 Green Team Summit, which will take place from October 8th through 11th as a unique hybrid experience featuring a keynote by Leah Thomas, founder of Intersectional Environmentalist, and recognized by Time magazine as one of the world's top 100 rising stars. Please read more about it and register in News and Notes. There are many new blazers and fall coats added today to the Joyce Van Cura collection in the basement of the RE building. You can go over and take a look anytime you like. And speaking of News and Notes, there's always a lot going on around the church. You can read all about it in the News and Notes, which arrives in your inbox every Friday, and there are printed copies available downstairs. If you would like to receive News and Notes, stop by the welcome table in the living room at the back of the church.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here with you today. My name is Gene. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a touch under 6 feet tall with long brown hair, a full beard, which can probably be most charitably described as salt and pepper. I'm wearing a purplish shirt and blazer, and I'm a little portly around the belly. And today I'm excited to talk to you about something that I, as a white, cisgendered, middle-class male, feel am uniquely qualified to discuss, and that is an oppressed minority. I wanted to discuss our lost heritage today because October's UU theme is heritage. Tomorrow is also Indigenous Peoples Day, pause for effect. And next month is American Indian and Alaskan Native Heritage Month. But first I just want to address nouns. Just that last sentence, we had three. We had Indigenous, American Indian, and Native. American Indian or Indian can often be seen as derogatory, but is actually used on reservations as a self-referential term quite a bit, especially as it's seen to most specifically distinguish tribes in the modern-day United States from other areas of North and South America. And we have a lot of other nouns. Original self-referential noun that is used, especially in Canada, is First Peoples. Canadians also use First Nations or Aboriginal, although I don't think that's really appropriate in the United States. In Spanish, the words, and I'm sorry for butchering these, I took French in high school, they often use indigena, comunidad, or pueblo. But people are capable of naming themselves, right? So today, if possible, I will just refer to people or groups as they call themselves. When quoting quotes, I will quote the quotes, quotationally. Otherwise, acknowledging that people are not homogenous, I will refer to groups by their tribe name if available, or culture if not. And if you're ever speaking with someone and are unsure what to call them, ask. That's true with nouns or pronouns. It's just generally a good idea. All right, and now let's light the chalice. So please repeat after me. The words are on the screen. As we light this chalice, may we know once again that we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery and miracle to the universe, to this community, and to each other. Now please rise and body our spirit for hymn number 1017, Building a New Way.
Associate Professor at the Ohio State University and citizen of the Pokagon Band of Potawatomi Indians. It is quoted from the WBEZ story, "Why Doesn't Illinois Have Any Reservations?" In recent years, there have been attempts to call attention to what we've been talking about here, that Illinois was once populated by Native Americans and that they were forced out. They're called land acknowledgments. Places like Steppenwolf Theater, the Newberry Library, and Northwestern University post these land acknowledgments on their websites, in their buildings, or announce them at the beginning of events. If it's just words that are being recited before a gathering of some kind, I don't think that anybody really finds that meaningful. But if land acknowledgements lead to conversations between indigenous people of the area and the suburb communities that have emerged on that land, then I think it can be a really good thing. It's fine to say, I'm on the land of somebody, but we shouldn't be living guilt-free on stolen land, right? And the point is not to make everybody guilt-ridden. The point is to promote truth and reconciliation. And reconciliation comes through that idea of, well, how can we make things right? How can we make amends for the taking of those lands? And it's never too late to make amends. And now we invite Pam Fodor up and the young at heart to join us for our time of all ages.
So my offering today is a video. So if the kids want to come up, they can, but it'll be on the screen too. They're deciding. Okay. So as Jean said, our theme this month is heritage. And heritage means to sort of look back and honor the things and the people and the parts of your life that used to be, which is sort of hard to do when you're little, but as we grow, we hear stories and experiences from our past, and that is what heritage means. So in a minute, we're going to watch a video and hear a story of how one indigenous group of young women set out to try to heal the world during the COVID-19 pandemic. They based it on stories and experiences from their heritage during the Spanish flu pandemic. It's called the Jingle Dress Project, and here's what the creator of the project had to say. Our project originated from a dream to unite the beauty of the land and the healing power of the jingle dance during these uncertain times due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The origin of the jingle dance to the Ojibwe people happened during the influenza pandemic of 1918-19. It came as a dream to a father whose daughter was sick with the virus. His dream revealed the new dress and the dance that had the power to heal. When the dresses were made, they were given to 4 women to perform the dance. When the little girl heard the sound of the jingles, she became stronger. And by the end of the night, she was dancing too. Our dream is to take this healing power to the land, to travel and capture a series of images to document the spiritual places where our ancestors once walked. Our goal is to unite and give hope to the world through art, dance, and culture to help us heal together. And here's the Jingle Dance Project.
My name is Erin Tapahi. I am a member of the Navajo Nation, and we are part of the Art Heals the Jingle Dress Project, and we're here in Minnesota for the purpose of dancing and healing.
The heart of our idea is to actually go out and to heal the land and heal the people. 100 years ago, the jingle dress dance originated with the Ojibwe people during the pandemic in 1918. And so we kind of feel like this is a great time for us to do what we're doing, and there's parallels between our project and that.
I'd always heard the story about the jingle dress dance tradition that that there was a little girl who became very ill, near death. Her father had this vision that ultimately saved her life, and this little girl became the first jingle dress dancer.
So my name is Eugene Sapahi. I'm with Sapahi Photography. I'm the owner and photographer. The project I'm working on right now is called the Art Heals, the Jingle Dress Project. It actually originated from a dream I had. I dreamt one night that I was actually in Yellowstone National Park, and I was sitting in a green field, and I was watching bison kind of grazing out on the field. And as I was sitting there, just enjoying the scenery, enjoying the moment, I realized that all of a sudden these jingle dress dancers started coming onto the grass, and then all of a sudden the song started, and they were started to dance. And it was really beautiful, and I really took it to heart that this was a sign for something that was something that I needed to do. So when we do go out to the lands, we're actually going to places where our ancestors have walked before, and so it makes us feel good when we go out there, because we're trying to also, along with the healing, we're also looking at it in the sense of the reclamation of native lands, reclaiming the land, and also we're there to heal the land, and we're there to heal the people that are supporting us, and also just all people in general during this pandemic.
I'm Brenda Child, a professor of American Studies and American Indian Studies at the University of Minnesota. I'm Red Lake Ojibwe, and I've been working on the history of the Ojibwe jingle dress dance tradition for quite a number of years now. I knew that the jingle dress was an Ojibwe tradition, and then it was kind of regional for many years. It was practiced by Ojibwe people of the Great Lakes of the United States and Canada, and then very quickly it moved to our Dakota neighbors. But it was sort of a regional tradition among Ojibwe and Dakota people until the later decades of the 20th century, when it became kind of a pan-Indian phenomenon.
I went to Standing Rock. That was where I had my calling to become a jingle dress dancer. And so ever since then, it's always been tied with my purpose of healing the land and healing those who are in need.
I'd always heard the story about the jingle dress dance tradition, that there was a little girl who became very ill, near death. Her father had this vision that ultimately saved her life, and this little girl became the first jingle dress dancer. And I thought that was a very powerful story. But what's interesting to me is that when I went looking at the history of the jingle dress, and I knew about it growing up at Red Lake. My grandmother, born in the early 20th century, was a jingle dress dancer all her life. She lived into her 80s. And so it was something I always knew about. In 1918-19, there was a terrible pandemic that was devastating to American Indians, as well as other people in the world. And who would have predicted that a whole new healing tradition would come out of that terrible pandemic, one that's still with us a century later? Every time you go to a powwow and you see the jingle dress dance performed, you're seeing history. It's about the pandemic of a century ago. So American Indians are very good at remembering the epidemic of a century ago. What's interesting, here we are figuring out now in another pandemic what the coronavirus is all about. The influenza in 1918-19 was very interesting too, because it was very deadly to young people. And that's considered a very worrisome thing in public health when young people die. But there was something about that virus that a lot of young people were susceptible to it. Now we find with the coronavirus, it's the older people who are susceptible to it. This pandemic tells me, as a historian, is how poor we are at predicting the future. A lot of people have said, oh, this is what the United States is going to be like after the pandemic. This is what Indian country is going to be like after the pandemic. We don't really know what the future is.
And just being able to to have this project to work on during this time, it's really healed me, and I know it's really empowered the girls to be able to be a part of this project. The locations we've selected are areas where we know that people are going to love to see those images that we've taken there with the girls in the jingle dresses, and then also knowing that those lands right now are needing healing. And so that's one of the biggest reasons we've chose the areas we've been to. And then when they get in front of the camera, their strength and their courage and the women they are, it comes through in the images. And I at times just cry because it's just so amazing to me how wonderful their lives are going to be when they become leaders and when they become our future.
It's been incredible to be here because usually we have 4 dancers, but today we have more dancers, and it's been a blast to be able to interact with them and to see the differences in jingle dresses, and it's the sacrifices of our ancestors that we will continue on their legacy. And I think that's the important parts of dancing on the land that they once were. And my dad had the dream of this project, and it's been giving us purpose, because we know that this purpose is going to be more than just the project now and visiting different locations. It's going to have a lasting impact on the public.
Let's sing the children to their classes. Very interesting video, Pam. As is our heritage, the second week of the month, we share the plate with a nonprofit or charitable organization that promotes social justice in accordance with our shared values. This month, Share the Plate goes to Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood of Illinois, or PPIL, has been a leader in sexual and reproductive health care, education, and advocacy for nearly 100 years. They provide high-quality and compassionate care to nearly 60,000 patients annually through a network of 17 health centers and digitally through their app and online services. With the overturning of Roe v. Wade, they anticipate an annual increase of 30,000 out-of-state patients seeking abortion care access in Illinois. PPIL will continue to expand access and provide care so that all patients can make their own decisions about their bodies and future. Together, they will ensure that access to quality, non-judgmental reproductive health care is a reality for all. And there's a short video to watch.
I wanted to share some of the feedback we received from patients we served this year, read by our development team members. Thank you again for making these moments possible.
A telehealth patient said, "Planned Parenthood is the safest and most comfortable I've felt in a medical setting."
A patient at our Champaign Health Center said, "Everyone at the clinic was very kind, compassionate, and made me feel extremely safe and comfortable. I was explained everything in great depth and great detail, and all of my questions were answered. Considering the circumstances, I did not feel as though I was being judged or looked down upon, and truly appreciated each and every person I encountered."
Because of your support, PPIL will continue to ensure that every patient, no matter where they live, has access to the healthcare they need and deserve.
You make this work possible, and we are so grateful for your generosity. Your support means so much to so many.
This week, all cash and checks received during service will go to Planned Parenthood. If you need your check to go directly to UCH or your pledge, please indicate that on your check. And if you would like to donate to Planned Parenthood but cannot today, you may do so at any time during October using the donate button on our website and selecting Social Justice Collection from the drop-down. I invite you to join in our offertory words. This church is made up of all of us. It is what we learn together, the work we do together, the fun we have together. It is what we share with one another, with people around us, and with all the world. We now gratefully receive your contribution. Thank you in advance for your generosity.
If everyone wants to put their feet on the ground, we'll have a quick meditation, if you want to. Put your arms near your side or in a comfortable location. Breathe deeply in and out. In and out. As you breathe through your nose, feel the air around your face. Feel the oxygen supply through your lungs. Feel your air exhale from your mouth as you give that air back to the world. We enter this space bringing with us joys, concerns, challenges, and blessings. If you have something either weighing or dancing on your heart this morning, you are invited to come up and drop a pebble in the water. If you wish, you can say a name, a word, or a short phrase to share your intention. A reminder that we are broadcasting to YouTube, so if using names, please be respectful of people's privacy. And as always, if you're more comfortable, pebbles can always be dropped in silence.
Hear me? Yeah, okay. 2 pebbles. Last week we had our pet blessing, and 2 young men heard about it, and they're here today. They're from PETA. They're touring the country, talking to children about humane education. So welcome, Matt and Robbie.
Morning, my name is Nancy, and I just wanted to let you know that Lorna Nuniker, who's a longtime member of our congregation, she's about ready to turn 95, she had a brief stay in the hospital this past week. She's home now, and she's doing fine, but her son thinks that it's about time that she had maybe a daytime caregiver. So that's what they're, kind of looking for at this point. He's willing to be very generous to this caregiver. So should you know anybody that might be interested in something like that, she lives here in LaGrange in a very nice big house in LaGrange, and it would just be like a daytime, kind of a thing, not 24 hours or anything like that. So I'd be very appreciative if anybody knows of anybody to let me know.
I'm dropping 2 pebbles in. One is for my late mom, and one is for my daughter.
I'm dropping a pebble in. As of Wednesday, Darren and I have celebrated 1-year anniversary.
Thank you very much.
Our second reading is from Bill Bryson's book, Made in America. New England may have been a new world to the Pilgrims, but it was hardly terra incognita. Much of the land around them had already been mapped. 7 years before, John Smith had remapped the region, diligently taking heed the names the Indians themselves used. He added just one name of his own devising, New England. But in a consummate display of brown-nosing, upon his return to England, Smith presented his map to Charles Stuart, the 16-year-old heir apparent to the throne, along with a note humbly entreating His Highness to change their barbarous names for such English as posterity might say Prince Charles was their godfather. The young prince fell to the task with a relish. He struck out most of the Indian names that Smith had so carefully transcribed and replaced them with a whimsical mix that honored himself and his family, or that simply took his fancy. Among his creations were Cape Elizabeth, Cape Anne, the Charles River, and Plymouth. Consequently, when the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth, one of the few tasks they didn't have to manage was thinking up names for the many landmarks around them.
Thank you, Megan. I love that reading because it really emphasizes the intent from the very moment that Europeans landed on this continent to not only extinguish the present people's heritage, but to eliminate it from history. In a prior paragraph, Bill Bryson talks about how English sailors already landed in that area and had already mapped the area and presumably gave English names to the area. So the English renamed everything, then rewrote the native names, and then struck them out and named things again. I mean, that's almost vindictive. That Bill Bryson quote is from like the second page of the book, and I could spend like the next 15 to 20 minutes just talking about the implications of those 2 pages, but I will sum up everything super briefly. The Pilgrims, who we are taught were Puritans, but were really separatists, landed on Plymouth Rock, although they most certainly did not, on the Mayflower, which they didn't even think of to mention in their writings. When they were starving to death, a Potoxic named Tisquantum, you might know him as Squanto, because they couldn't pronounce his real name, kept them alive by helping them befriend the local Pokanoke, either partially or primarily by acting as translator. And how is he able to translate this, you might ask? I had never thought about this, but the reason why is because he had already been to Europe. Twice. First, on a working trip back with John Smith, and the second as a slave in Spain, where he stayed for 15 years. When he returned home, he found that his entire village, extinct from smallpox, brought by the Europeans who enslaved him and who he now spent the last year and a half of his life trying to save. Why we don't have a 550-foot marble obelisk in Washington, D.C. monumenting him is beyond my comprehension. The point is that the beginning of European history on this continent is at best a little hazy, but that doesn't excuse us from beginning human history on this continent at that point. Hopefully things are better now, but pre-European history, when I went to school, especially grade school, basically consisted of 3 sentences. People came over from Asia, then some Vikings landed and hung out for a bit, and then Christopher Columbus. We don't know exactly when people entered this hemisphere. Linguistics and genetic studies show that they must have come in 3 waves. The common consensus and what most people know of is they arrived by a land bridge between present-day Siberia and Alaska, somewhere about 15 to 29,000 years ago. There was a study at Oxford, that said that some people must have arrived by ship over 30,000 years ago, before the land bridge even was created. And there have been some studies for a while that show that South America might have been populated by people from Oceania and Australia. At any rate, it appears that people first arrived in the Chicago area about 12,000 years ago. Most of that history is sketchy at best, but the people in the Chicagoland history can start to be categorized into 3, and I'm vastly oversimplifying this, so if you know better than me, please don't be mad. 3 eras: the Archaic, Woodland, and Mississippian. I did not know there are over 8,000 archaic archaeological sites in Illinois, and they span over 5,000 years. During this time, people started transitioning from temporary camps, usually of about 15 to 20 people, to semi-permanent villages. Spears were replaced by bows and arrows, and there were signs of quarries used to create and repair arrow tips. And these were not Stone Age tools. Although the Europeans brought over smelting, these tools were basically built out of bronze and silver. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, northern Illinois was traditionally not considered an interesting enough archaeological area. In the late 50s and early 60s, an archaic site right here in present-day DuPage was discovered. It took them 3 years to excavate it, and then they never made the results public. That's called the Kautz site, K-A-U-T-Z, if you want to Google it. I know about it because in 2016, somebody finally published results. But I can't be too judgmental because I'm going to also skip over all that and go straight to the Havana Hopewell culture in the late Woodland period, which is about 200 BC to 400 AD. And it extended primarily to the west in Europe, in Iowa, Wisconsin. It also extended to the east a little bit in Indiana. And the Havana Hopewell was part of what's now called the Hopewell interaction sphere. The Hopewell culture included some of the first mound builders, which were around for about another 2,500 years, and it would dominate Midwestern culture. They would create cultural centers spread throughout the present-day Midwest, Great Lakes, and Southwest regions. Sites in the Chicago area include artifacts made of shark teeth, marine shells, obsidian from the Yellowstone region, beads made from a meteorite that landed in Minnesota, and copper and silver from the upper Great Lakes. Pottery with Havana-specific artwork can also be found throughout the present-day United States. And at first it was thought that this was the result of like a giant trade network, but as they looked at it more, they realized that's not the case. If these artifacts had been traded with people, then you would see them along like trade routes, but they weren't. They just kind of popped up independently in a bunch of different places. So they think that the reason why that happened was these areas were not actually isolated and connected by trade routes, but people from these areas traveled all over the place. They took their belongings with them, and they picked up new precious belongings before heading home. So in short, this is not like buying a jacket from Italy. This is like going to Italy, buying a jacket, and then leaving a Michael Jordan jersey there. And the reason you get to these places is, again, because they are huge cultural centers. People would build these giant mounds, and soon they would become attractions that people from all over the continent would want to visit. Areas around them would evolve from villages to cities, and these cities would have complex hierarchical, political structures, and one of the markers of any advanced society, institutional income equality. And the biggest, greatest, most culturally significant of these was Cahokia, so I just want to talk about that real quick. That was a city just east of present-day St. Louis. You can visit it in Collinsville, Illinois. At its height, approximately 1,000 years ago, it had a population somewhere between 15,000 and 25,000 people. I saw one source that said it might have been as high as 40,000, which would have been the largest population north of Mexico until Philadelphia in the 1780s, but I must say the only place I found that was in Wikipedia. I couldn't substantiate that anywhere else, so take that with a grain of salt, but it's still a fun fact. At any rate, it was unquestionably the largest city north of Mexico prior to the Europeans landing. And I want to be clear, this was not a collection of like wigwams and huts. This was a planned urban area developed over the course of centuries. Cahokia consisted of public squares, athletic fields, cemeteries, and political buildings topping carefully designed earthworks. The largest of which would be the largest man-made structure north of Mexico into 1857. And I do want to note that the south of Mexico structures that were larger were also pre-European, so this was quite large. And it was not just a political or cultural center, but it was also a scientific one. Evidence of advanced astrological knowledge included Woodhenge, which was a collection of 4 sun clocks that were named that way because they look like Stonehenge, but there were 4, which is more than 1, which is better. The thing that I think is coolest about Cahokia, though, is its demographics. For Cahokia is a misnomer. It wasn't the name of the city. It wasn't even the name of a city. It was actually the name of a people that came like 1,000 years later. When the French first stumbled upon it, they wanted to know what it was, and nobody really knew, so they just named it after the Cahokia who showed it to them the first time. Evidence suggests that a big reason why we don't really know who lived there or why they decided to leave was because it wasn't a people who lived there, but rather Cahokia was populated by a melting pot of different tribes and cultures. They probably all came together to see this great city and decided to stay there because, it was just the perfect place for the little Mississippian about town. In short, it wasn't a city, it was a cosmopolitan. This was like the Mississippi version of St. Louis, and it was by St. Louis. And just like present-day St. Louis, people couldn't wait to leave to go to Chicago. And so it was that sometime around 1000 to 1200 AD, people migrated from Cahokia, or at least the region, met with people migrating south from present-day Wisconsin during the late woodlands and formed the Winota. I think that's how it's pronounced. I promise I tried really hard to find that, but it looks like Winota. And these were the primary residents of the Chicagoland area for several hundred years, and they're also some of the earliest named people that I could find in this area. Around the same time, another group of people called the Anishinaabe started migrating west. I want to talk about them real quick because they're going to be important to the next part of the story. The Anishinaabe included the Mississaugas, Nipissing, Algonquin, Ottawa, Ojibwa, and Potawatomi tribes. Sometime around 800, they were led by the first prophecy to leave their home on the East Coast and travel to the Great Lakes region. Most never made it as far as Chicago, but around 1200, 3 of these groups split up in the present-day Niagara Falls to form the Council of Great Fires. They all ended up back in Chicago later, so I'm going to name them real quick. Ojibwe, we saw in the video, or Chippewa. They were the keepers of medicine. They moved north and west of Lake Superior. Ottawa, or Ottawa, they were the keepers of the trade. They migrated to North Lake Superior, Michigan, and Huron. And the Potawatomi, or Potawatomi, the keepers of fire, migrated south to the coast of Lake Michigan. Like I said, they didn't all set out to this area. They were basically pushed here by French and English colonizers, with the exception of the Potawatomi. We will leave those there and now go to the pre-European times and talk about why there are no reservations in Illinois. In 1803, the Potawatomi were the predominant tribe in present-day Chicago. Other tribes who lived here include the Miami, Ozagie or Sauk, and Meskwaki or Fox. And of these, like I said, only the Potawatomi were basically native. But it wasn't, even though they were pushed far away, it wasn't quite far enough away, and as these tribes moved west, so did the Europeans, enticed by northern Illinois' rich farmland and coal and lead mines. I didn't know we had lead mines here, but apparently that was a huge thing. This led to a series of treaties, which I won't go through because that'll take forever, and I'm afraid I'm already boring people. So I will mention two. The first is the 1829 Treaty of Prairie du Chien in Wisconsin. That one is notable because primarily it was designed to take land that was able to open up the Chicago waterway and link Lake Michigan to the Mississippi. But as part of that, they also gave some land back to people of Potawatomi heritage. And one of those was a man named Saganash, or more commonly known by his baptized name, Billy Caldwell. He was half Potawatomi and half English. He eventually sold most of his land and was forced from the area by 1836. But some of his land remained unsold and was eventually granted to the Cook County Forest Preserve. And there you will find the Caldwell Woods, the Caldwell Golf Course, and the Saginash residential neighborhood in Forest Glen. As a side, Prairie du Chien is also where Black Hawk, among others, surrendered in 1832 following the Battle of Bad Axe. And that basically was the last straw in getting all of those people outside of Illinois. In 1833, the government basically took the rest of their land. It was following the Indian Removal Act of 1830 and settlers' discomfort of Black Hawk's war against the occupying force. And it sought and succeeded to remain all remaining peoples from Illinois, Wisconsin, and Michigan, including reservations that they were already promised. And on the morning of September 4th, 1838, 859 Potawatomi, with their leaders shackled and restrained in the back of a wagon, set out on a 660-mile trek from northern Illinois to Kansas across the Mississippi. Federal troops first gathered these individuals at a church without telling them why they were gathered, so they were totally unprepared for this journey. Their march through present-day Springfield, it was so brutal that newspapers at the time said that white people gathered outside to watch and openly wept. Many individuals, especially the very old and very young, died on the trek, which to this day is referred to by the Potawatomi as the Trail of Death. Now, I do want to be a little fair and say that when these people were displaced, they were able to settle on land that they had previously scoped out. And eventually, sometimes it took many decades, but eventually they were given the equivalent of millions of dollars in compensation. But a lot of that was mitigated by the Allotment Act, so I just want to go through that really briefly because that's very, very important. The Allotment Act of 1877, or the Dawes Act, was one of the most damaging things that have ever happened to our Native people's ability to sustain themselves. And basically, allotment eliminated future treaties, gave Congress the power to legislate all Indian land, and carved up reservations acquired from previous treaties into sections, or allotments. These sections were then transferred from the tribes to individuals, typically in 40 to 160 acre squares, and they were not actually given to them, though. They were allowed to hold the land, but the land was put in a federal trust. So the federal government took over the land, they took it and said, we will allow you to stay on this land. They did not take these reservations and split them up. They didn't say, oh, there's 1,000 people here, so we need to split this up into 1,000. They just set sizes of squares, and then whatever was left over was considered surplus, and that was given back to the government or sold at auction to private industry. And I think you can probably guess that most of that surplus area was the best area on the reservation. Somebody, if they stayed on that land for 25 years, they would get to own it outright. So there's that, but that's actually damaging. I'll talk about that in just a second. Why is this shift in policy? First and foremost, the US government considered Indian way of life to be communistic and backwards. Individual ownership of land was seen as essential to civilization in general and to the American capitalistic way specifically. Best case, ownership of land would help assimilate the natives into American culture, and at worst case, it would open up their land for sale to private industry. And allotted land was not, like I said, based on the land, most arable, but the goal was for people to go and farm that land. Unfortunately, the United States government gave these people neither the training nor the resources in order to start that. Eventually people ended up in poverty. But perhaps one of the most important issues was fracturing. Fracturing occurred because when a landholder died, the land would be split up among their heirs, but they wouldn't actually split up the land amongst their heirs. So if you had 3 heirs, all 3 heirs owned 1/3 of that land, but didn't actually have any segmented portion of it. And that kept happening through the generations, so it ended up being like an exponential effect. If someone was given in 1880 1,000 acres of land, by the time their great-great-grandchildren inherited it in 1960, they would have the equivalent of 2 acres worth of that 1,000 acres, and they would have to share that with the other 500 people. If you still own the land today, if I'm doing the math right, you would basically be owning square inches of that original 1,000 acres, and again, having to share that land with 1,000 other people. So as a result of all these issues, by the time the land was removed from trust, or after several generations of ownership, many owners were at or near the poverty level, and they decided to sell their land at any cost. Allotment ended at 1934, and when that happened, over 138 million acres of land had been ceded from the reservations that were originally given them to the United States government. That's larger than the state of Canada, or I'm sorry, That's larger than the state of California. It's not quite as large as Canada, and it's larger than Nevada and Utah combined. So that was a lot of land that was basically taken back. Things did get better in 1934. Effectively, that ended allotment and put everything in trusts in perpetuity. That was kind of good because it meant that there was some stability there. Congress couldn't just come and like take it away willy-nilly whenever they wanted to. But again, the trusts are owned by the United States government, which meant that the people on that land were not able to manage the land as they saw fit. They basically had to ask the United States government if it was okay to manage the land that they wanted. And this sets up, to this day, a bureaucratic nightmare where people are not able to manage land in the way that private industry is able to manage land within their reservation right next to their land. So, what can we do? Well, first off, we need to humanize our Native people, our indigenous cultures. We need to recognize that these are not homogenous people. Each tribe has their own needs and issues which must be addressed. We also need to recognize that portraying indigenous people, especially American Indians, as these wise spiritual sages who just want to live in commune with nature is a bit condescending. And this might be difficult to wrap your head around because when I first read that, I'm like, no, it's not. Like that's reverential. Like we're thinking of these people in this reverential way. But there is a lot going on in that description. Indigenous people are lawyers, professors, car mechanics, doctors. The only American Indian I really knew, and she referred to herself as American Indian, was a physics postdoc who I met as an intern at Argonne, and she lived in Montana. So these are not people who just want to live out in peace on their reservation and not communicate with anybody. And these are also people who want to manage their land. And when you have this image of someone who just wants to sit there living in commune with nature, it's real easy to turn the other way and say, you know, what are they going to do with it anyway? It's okay we're selling this to mining companies. It's okay we're using this for farming. It's okay we're using this for agriculture. These people are just going to sit on and not do anything with it. And that is simply not the case. And it's driving people into poverty. Which brings me to my second point. We need to support legislation and policies which return land use rights to the holders. We should allow the holders of the land in trust to use it as we would anybody else. And I'm not saying give them limitless control over it, just allow them to treat it like we would a big private corporation that owns the land right next to them. We could also just return the land to them. That's an option, right? We could return not only the land that they currently hold on trust, but we could return the land that's within their reservation that we sold at a point in time. That'll cost money. We'll probably have to buy that land back to give it back to them, but it is the right thing to do. There is a bill introduced in the last Congress, S-3242, by Republican Senator Jerry Moran of Kansas, that would return 130 acres of old reservation land here in DeKalb back to the Potawatomi or Potawatomi tribe. That would be the first reservation in Illinois since the 1830s. Bills like these should be considered and probably passed. I haven't read that one, so I'm not going to say to like call, but you know, look at it. Finally, we can meet and learn about our pre-European culture. I meant to spend a lot more time on specific culture here, but I know this is basically turned into a glorified land acknowledgement or an excruciating one, depending on how well I've done. But there's just so much to talk about. But another thing that I did not touch on really quick was the termination policies of the 50s and 60s. These policies were designed to terminate Native cultures and assimilate them into the United States by removing federal recognition of the tribes, ejecting them from their land and making them move into cities and basically get real jobs. As a result of that, though, now these policies were eliminated in the 70s. That's actually, from these policies came a lot of the Native American rights movements that happened in the 70s. But through that, a lot of these natives moved to Chicago. I have a stat, let me find it. Chicago now has the third highest urban population in the entire country, with more than 65,000 Native Americans in the greater metropolitan area and some 175 different tribes represented. This means that there are bountiful opportunities to learn about their culture, to share in their experiences, and to pass that knowledge onto others and support their rights. As a start, I'd recommend checking out the American Indian Center Chicago website, aicchicago.org. A lot of damage was done during the termination policies. It basically separated older Indians and Native Americans who had knowledge of their culture from younger people being brought up. But we still have time to kind of bridge that gap. There's a lot of work and effort being done there, but we can help. This is an opportunity to ensure that their culture is passed on to future generations. And, we probably have the opportunity to learn from them as well. Thank you very much. So now we will go to our, I thought we were doing, you want to do Lean on Me? People want to, sorry.
Please join me in these extinguishing the chalice words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of its truth, the warmth of this community, nor the fire of our commitment. These we carry in our hearts and share with all the world.
I'd like to play for you a song that you'll probably recognize from the Ken Burns PBS series, The Civil War. It's called, I never know how to pronounce this, Ashokan or Ashokan Farewell. And the Ashokan Reservoir is where the Lenape Indians lived and of course had it taken from them. So the song initially was a tribute to the Ashokan Reservoir. And what Ashokan actually means is a beautiful place to fish. So I hope you recognize